So anyway, I was saying like we, whatever, African Americans, we're like the only people in this country that can't actually be sent somewhere else. You hear me? And it's like, because even if you look, a lot of Native Americans, when you really do, like, not even DNA, you really do the genealogy on them, and you find out that, that at some point in time in the last 150 years, someone just took that status. They might have been a great-great-grandfather who was actually from Germany. Might have been somebody who was white mixed with black who called themselves Indian because it was better than saying black. Just like how white people would say they were Jewish instead of admitting that they were half black. Like in that movie that we saw, The Human Stain, the dude who was Anthony Hopkins when he got older, when he was younger, the real life actor who played him, in real life he's like passing for white. He doesn't pass because he tells people that his dad's black and shit, but he looks like a white man. And so in the movie, he's playing a guy who both his parents were real light-skinned black people, and he was telling people he was Jewish because he's got curly hair. Keep that hair cut short, and say, oh, it's a Jew fro, okay. And back then they say they were Jewish, say they're Italian, say they were Indian.
Anything but black because black was too hard.
And so a lot of these Native Americans are like that because the Native Americans now, for the most part, are white or whitish people. And I'm not saying that they're all fake. Some of them, they people came over, up the Bering Strait, and they're mixed, or they're, like they call them Mongoloids. I don't even know if that's an offensive term, but they're coming through that bloodline. But you got a lot of people who don't even have that in them. You got a lot of people who don't even have any native blood in them at all. They're white. And so, yeah, you don't have to go back that far to find out the motherfuckers came from Europe. And so a lot of them, even the Native Americans claiming to be natives, the motherfuckers could be shipped back to somewhere in Europe. But black people, Moors, can't be sent anywhere because we're from here. And when they had that Hurricane Katrina shit, they were calling the black people refugees. What kind of shit is that? There's a whole lot going to that, but like they calling them refugees and shit. Nobody else that's American that's from this country gets called that. Black people are not citizens of this country, never have been citizens of this country. They did this thing called the 14th Amendment to allow us to have some of the rights of citizens. But if you look at anything, that's why you always hear the Moors talking about the Dred Scott case. There's several other cases where they specifically state Negroes are not citizens of this country. We cannot really truly have the rights. It's just an amendment that allows us to vote, that allows us to do certain things.
But they're talking about the corporation,
the
business, not the land, because the people, indigenous black people, are from the land, and that's how they ripped the land from the people, because they created an entity and put all of their people into the entity and left all the indigenous people out, because they had a cover-up called slavery, where some Africans did come over here on slave ships, and they looked just like the indigenous people that was over here, so it was easier to lump them all in one category. That's where the fucking blanket got pulled over people's heads, because everybody's thinking that Indian or, Native American, they look like this, like mixed, straight hair, light skin, red people, because they're not thinking that the indigenous people look fucking African from Africa.
Yeah, and that's true. So like people don't understand that, or even grasp that concept, because like it only takes like 1 or 2 generations to really like wipe things out and to start with a clean slate. So once they started teaching this to everyone, that the Native Americans are this and that black people all came over here on slave ships, something that they didn't even have the ability to do, that even if you do the numbers on the amount of actual voyages they have, it still doesn't even add up to the numbers that they're told, like 20 or 40 million came over here. They don't even have the capacity to do that, even looking at the numbers with the slave voyages that were recorded. So that wasn't real. It happened, but it was a small amount that came over here. And like there's this guy who commented on my Moors in America site, and he's like, oh, attacking the stuff on there. There's an article talking about how Moorish Americans, whatever, from this country were indigenous, and he's attacking it with a bunch of nonsense points. And he brings up this thing talking about Estevanico was an African who came over here and he was killed by the Navajo Indians. And I just destroyed that shit because I'm like, you dumbass, you gonna comment on some shit that could be just, anyone could just look online and see that even that has holes in it. He's like, the story was that Estevanico was a Moor. He was actually from Morocco. He came over here with the Spanish, and 300 of these motherfuckers got attacked and killed by the natives. Only 4 of them survived, and guess who was one of them? Estevanico, with no problem. Why? Because he looked just like the motherfucking natives. 4 survivors. He wound up going off even deeper into the country. He went all the way from Florida into, they say, like some natives say that they saw him heading out towards New Mexico. This motherfucker got out there and set up shop. And he just lived the rest of his life. And it's like, you couldn't do that unless you were a Moor. He just fit right in. And like, you look at the reason why you would say we're Moors is because this is what the Europeans were saying back in those days, from the 1500s on up to the 1700s. They were calling the natives over here Moors and blackamoors and describing them as Moors. This is written down and documented all over the place. You know, and then even the ones that were over here of European descent were describing the natives as Moors. Moor, blackamoor, Indian, Negro were all interchangeable. This is how they describe the natives. And that doesn't describe most of it, because there's a few people that have Native American status that you know are Moors, but for the most part they're white, or they're white and Asian mixed looking, and that's what is commonly accepted. People don't even know this about it. That you can't look at the people calling themselves Native Americans today and call them, you know, Moors or Indian, Moor, Indian, or Negro. You can't just mix all that shit up, because they look nothing like the people who are considered Negroes today, right? But back then, that's what they look like. So something has happened. Something has changed. And since people don't know that, and they have no idea, or they you know, people are indoctrinated. People have been taught something all their life, and so it's hard for them to grasp a different concept. It's so unrealistic to them, because what's real to them is that back in the days, these motherfuckers who thought the world was flat, just like within 10 years had the capacity to bring millions of people over to a new country that they're coming into it trying to fight off the natives, trying to take over a country, but yet they have the capacity. They're so great and strong that they can bring a whole bunch of people from Africa, from a country where they've lived at and where they have a stronghold. They can go in there, which means they got to fight 2 wars on 2 fronts. They got to go into a continent and attack and conquer these people. Then they got to go to a new country and attack and conquer those people. And they're going to bring some of the people from the other country that they're fighting to the new country that they're fighting. So they had the capacity. Was that confusing? They're able to fight a war on 2 fronts. They're just so strong. They can. And this is talking about these motherfuckers thought the world was flat. This is what they taught us. Do they still teach that shit?
This is the beast man. You know, this is the caveman. This is They have the animalistic, you know, shit in them to be able to do that, because that's what they were created for. But
well, let me finish like how ludicrous that shit sounds, though. Do they still teach that these motherfuckers thought the world was flat? Because they taught us that they thought the world was flat. Christopher Columbus, some people thought, scientists and shit back then from Europe thought he was gonna just roll off the world, you know. So all of a sudden, these motherfuckers rose up and just conquered and kicked everyone's ass. So they go into Africa and they beating the shit. They just going running through Africa like it ain't shit. And they're grabbing them like, hey, y'all coming over here with us. Get on the boats. And then they go into a new country with all types of shit they've never seen before. And they got to fight the natives there. Plus they bring in people from another country with them. And then the ships were so stacked up that half of them died on the trip. They're laying in their own piss and shit. And it's a 3-month voyage across the ocean. Okay, so how the fuck they're feeding them, they're taking care of them, half of them are that. It's like just too much shit. And yet to get those people, they had to fight a war in Africa. It's like, get the fuck out of here. It was too much going on. Now I'm not saying none of this happened in some degree, but not to what they're told. They couldn't have brought all of us over here. Some bullshit. You know, did Africans come over here as POWs of war? Yeah. Did some come over on their own free will? Yeah. Did some of them come over as part of the Spanish conquest, the Spanish expeditions? Yeah. You know, some of them were Moriscos or whatever. Some of them were
coming over here freely for trade and already had set up stuff over here. That's the only reason why the white man knew about this place over here, because some nigga went and fucking ran his mouth and told them, hey, you give me this, you know, trying to trade to get something from them. You know, they fucking brought them over here. They ain't know what the fuck was about to happen.
Well, if you're listening to this and you believe that mythological bullshit, it's something that they don't teach you in class. That Europe was in the Dark Ages. It was fucked up. The people there were so nasty. They didn't bathe. When they had shit, they just threw it out the window on the street. They were disgusting. So
those dying, just disgusting, you know, birth rates low.
So in the 700s, when the Moors came into Europe, started to come into Europe and take over, they started to enlighten the people. They had to set up public bathhouses and shit, teach them how to scrub and clean themselves. They set up the schools. They showed them the medical sciences and things to improve the quality of living, right?
Only because they started mixing with them and they started fucking having offsprings with them. And that's when they started giving a fuck, because those are their children. You can't turn your back on your kids. And that's why the white man don't want mixing, you know, to have their race, you know what I'm saying, superior or whatever. Because once they start mixing, they have to share.
Yeah, well, this is what they don't teach you in school, man. Europe wasn't shit. And the Moors ruled for 800 years. And this whole Columbus and all this shit thinking the world was flat, they weren't able to do anything until the Moorish Empire fell. It just happened to fall in 1492, which is coincidentally when Columbus ass was allowed to leave Europe. They weren't allowed to go anywhere. They weren't allowed to come to this part of the hemisphere. Okay, we didn't think the fucking world was flat. We already mapped out stars and everything, and knew about the oceans and all the different continents and shit like that, and even had trade going back and forth between the Americas. But they don't teach you any of that. And since you don't take anything that wasn't taught to you by your own oppressors and shit, it's true, you don't think outside the box. You just accept that shit as fact. Okay, so yeah, there was already Moors living over here. There was Moors all over the world. They weren't allowed to come in and out of here until they inherited the Moorish Empire. When the Moorish Empire fell, the stronghold just happened to be in Granada, Spain at the time. So they inherited a lot of that knowledge.
And a lot of people are getting caught up with Moors. Well, replace the word Moor for black so that you could fucking follow. Because, you know, a lot of people, I'm not Moor. They don't know what a Moor is. They don't understand what a Moor is. They think that it's a group of people that, you know, was in Spain and stuff. It's like, no. Replace the word Moor with the word black. So
yeah, and follow. Look, this is the reason why it was Moor, okay? Because like I said earlier, Indian, Negro, you know, Moor, black or Moor was all interchangeable. The fucking natives over here were Moors. The natives in Africa were Moors. The black people in Europe were Moors, okay? Everyone was a fucking Moor. You know why? Because anytime they came upon a civilization where the people weren't throwing shit in the street, okay? Because the Native Americans here said that they could smell the Europeans miles away, okay? When they got there, they were so filthy and fucking nasty and disgusting. They could smell them. They knew they were coming. They knew their little settlements were there because they were disgusting. Okay, so this is why whenever they encountered those people, they called them Moors. Okay, they saw the people, they saw how they looked and dressed, they saw how they had some kind of, you know, morals and different things going on with their civilization. So they're like, okay, these are Moors. All right, that was the freaking marker of a Moor. So there you have it.